Welcome to The Word Revealed with David Palmer and Scott Burns, where we talk about everything Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Let's join the conversation.
Welcome back to The Word Revealed. I'm David Palmer with my good friend, fellow lover of Christ and His Word, Scott Burns, and Dr. Jerry Pattengale. We're going to continue the conversation, take us into the Gospels. Scott, what's your favorite Gospel? I know it's hard to choose one, but what?
The Gospel of Mark became my favorite Gospel a couple of years ago, and never really left that.
And what about the Gospel of Mark just captured your heart?
I love the speed of it, and the way he tells the stories.
So it's direct, it's clear. It's
succinct, which I usually am. So.
You know, that's Jerry. That's something that when you spend time with Scott, you grow to love. I call it sometimes the laconic Scott Burns. So I'm kind of long-winded. Scott sometimes just is like, just bullseye.
Somebody has to bring some balance. So.
You got to just hone it in, or there's a kind of a Burnsian idiom that we delight in. So that makes sense. Clear. And
but you have to worry about those laconic people.
Why should I be worried about Scott?
I have a laconic. Our oldest son's laconic. It comes from Laconia with the Spartans.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that.
They're given to physical instead of conversational.
That's true.
So he's calling you a Spartan, I think, here. So
that's right. The Athenians are the kind of the long-winded, and they'd rather just talk about something rather than just get it done. So yeah, that's good. I appreciate you clarifying that. I'll keep my eye out. Make sure there's no like Bronze Age weaponry kind of slipping out of his pastoral suite.
And for those of you that are listening, Scott's here taking notes the whole time too. So it shows a little bit of.
Well, I'm sitting at a table with 2 PhDs, and I represent the normal man. So that's my role in this podcast.
So
try and bring it back down to the level of
listen.
Common
Everybody respected the Spartans, though. I mean, they held the line, and I mean that's there's something to be said for that. So don't mess with those guys. And so, okay, so you mentioned the Gospel of John for you, Mark for you. I would say Matthew for me, and I love them all. But if I had to pick one, Jerry, you've written a recent book on the Gospels, and tell us the origin of this project and what's unique about this particular project. And I really want to hear for the listeners. If you look it up, Jerry's recent book on the Gospels, there's a really captivating cover image. So I want you to interpret that as well.
Thanks for asking that. Well, I'm glad you asked about the origin of it, because we had produced, I say we, I'm the main writer, but I had a team of 150 different scholars around the world. And we put together 4 textbooks for schools, and they were based around the 3 themes a museum is based around: the history, story, and impact of the Bible. And there are 108 chapters in 4 different books, plus 4 different books for teachers, so 8 books. There was high tech, there was learning objects that would literally come out into your phone when you held them over. It was just amazing. All the schools in Israel used the equivalent of the Hebrew Bible version. In Hebrew, we did it in Hebrew, so they used it for several years in all their schools. The only non-yeshiva student that ever won the International Bible Study Award used our curriculum.
Wow.
But the problem is that for public schools in America, there was some concern that there was too much history and too many artifactual discussions around the actual sacred text. And it wasn't that it wouldn't have succeeded, it's that we didn't want it to create a problem, because someone could take another sacred text in and say, look, we're going to surround it with this and show you that, the Quran, or it could be anything, the Bhagavad Gita. We decided to start over, still use those texts because they're good, and they still could be used in different schools. I mean, it's like trying to read Les Mis without studying the French Revolution. It's almost impossible to understand Les Mis without. So it was kind of a dual standard there, but we started over. And Timothy Dalrymple and I are the main writers of the Bible's evident. So the Bible and its influence on Western civ. So that's another book that came out. But the Gospels, what we did with the old curriculum, those 4 volumes I just told you about, which is still really good, we pulled all the story sections out. And we brought them together in a narrative, and we said, of these stories that we've told throughout these 4 volumes, what are the common themes of those? And what are the common themes that any responsible person representing the key teachings of the Gospels would include? Obviously, the resurrection would be there. Obviously, the birth story. So we go through, and miracles, so we go through and we simply follow those in a very narrative style. And I think that I'm the author, but I had a team of people helping me, just like the people in this room help you with this podcast. And so that's how that story came about.
Tell us about the cover picture.
Okay.
How did that end up?
The cover is a fist holding a cross. It's a hand off a Byzantine statue. So before anything else, when you have a dismembered statue, it tells you of violence. People don't destroy. Well, I say that, and recently in America they destroyed many statues. But normally you have Parian marble, with the finest marble, and you have a hand that was sculpted, and it's a priest's hand with the ring, and he holds the cross. So it tells you that it's probably in one of the times that we can probably date it, whether it's 900, 1100, when some of the attacks took place in Jerusalem. So first of all, it's from Jerusalem, and that's where it's from. We don't know a lot more than that. But it's also from the collection of Oded Golan. Oded's a friend, Oded and Ruth Kanani, who he owns the James Ossuary box. It says, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. So I've spent many days with him, traveled with him. I turned the corner from seeing the ossuary box, and there was that hand mounted. Never been used like this. The world didn't know about it. They know about the James Ossuary box. That's in Justin Johnson's book. It's been discussed up and down. Some people think it's the real inscription. Some don't. I think it's real. And Jeremy Johnson has it as one he believes is real. But that hand was so gripping, no pun intended,
right,
because it shows the force of the gospel as well. And the Gospels took the world by storm. It's a movement. Pliny the Younger, you remember what he says in is it Trajan?
Trajan
in 110 AD. It's so fun to have someone here correct me here because I'm getting old. So, and he what's he ask him?
The attendance is down at the pagan shrines and trying to explain it, and what do Christians really believe? The emperor writes back, and if you look earlier, we did have an episode on this correspondence in his letters of evidence for Jesus and the growth of Christianity outside of the New Testament, and it's one of our earliest depictions of Christian worship that we have, and singing hymns to Christ as to God, and binding themselves on oath to basically walk in God's commandments. So
I'll have to listen to that. In fact, I have to give it a shout out on my in my social space. Yeah, he basically say, what do we do with all these people?
Yeah.
Do we persecute all of them? Help us out here. What are you going to do? What's interesting as well, Pliny the Younger, many people visit Pompeii. It's Pliny the Younger who's in a boat taking notes on his uncle dying. Right. Pliny the Elder.
That's when scientific curiosity, that's the dark side of scientific curiosity.
Yeah. So we have so many overlapping pieces of evidence. Kamala Harris kind of made popular, or however you say, the Venn diagram, or at least brought it to people's attention. The truth is, it's just a powerful illustration of the overlapping pieces of information. And so here you have Pliny, and you have that whole discussion. The gospel does take root, and we have evidence of those things happening.
I love just responding to it visually. I love the picture of having a firm hold on the cross, and that the cross itself becomes this, surprisingly, in one sense, in terms of history and archaeology and cultural context, that you would choose that as the defining symbol of Christianity and the gospel narratives. So it's a really gripping cover.
And just for those of you who have followed like the Shroud discussion or some of these manuscript discussions and the Dead Sea Scroll discussions, because some of them have been forged, some of them haven't been. That very artifact on our cover, if we wanted to do this, we don't have any real reason, to quote Malcolm Gladwell here, we haven't had any red flags not to believe that that's real. There's anything he's done. He says in Talking with Strangers, that's when you start questioning things. And we've really not had that with this item and all, but we could do a DNA test of it and see if it's actually from Parian marble there or if it came out of Italy. We could test the patina on that and see if it matches the time. So there are all kinds of scientific tests. When we tested our Dead Sea Scrolls, it was probably $1 million over 2 or 3 years. I mean, we had a third party do it. You could test that artifact out to see if it's real. And I know I'm getting a little bit off here, but when the Exodus took place, Amenhotep is one of the pharaohs that people think may have been Pharaoh of the Exodus. I mean, we don't really know. Kenneth Kitchen is pretty adamant, on something. But I went to the Brooklyn Library to look at their Brooklyn Museum to look at their statue. And I'm looking at it because I also knew this about it. It was their center of their Egyptian collection. It was Amenhotep III. And they paid, I think, $1 million for it in the 60s, maybe. It's if you have my book, Biblical Evidence, I have a section in there on it. And they saw a picture of the collector, and behind him was another statue on the shelf, and it had the same supraorbital ridge. And I can't remember if we talked about this last night, but they then thought, we better test this out because that looks similar to this one, but it's not the same. And they looked in the eye holes, and instead of diamond drill bit marks, they found stainless steel, or they found metal. And so they realized it had been forged, and then they did a DNA test and found out it came from the Black Sea instead of the cataracts of the Nile. So
do you get a receipt on you spend $1 million on an artifact? Do you get
no?
Is there like a return line?
No,
like at Costco, and you go.
And with the Museum of the Bible, we've been through that simply because people are greedy and people do things, and you can do everything by the book. And then you realize someone's changed the pages in the very book that you bought.
Yeah.
And that's it. But, the text we're discussing talks about the hearts of men. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about money and the good use and the bad use. And so the thing we're talking about with these antiquities, the Bible tells us people will do these things.
And I guess just hearing you say that, it makes me think of the endings of all the Gospels. Matthew's ending is an invitation to give away all the benefits of the kingdom, make disciples of all nations. Mark's gospel, the shorter ending.
I was going to say which ending. One is it? Yeah.
I think the shorter. I think it ends with. I mean, it's Scott's favorite. He should probably step forward.
I'll let you continue.
You're
on a roll.
It's ends with suspense.
Yeah.
And inviting the reader to respond. Luke's gospel ends with forgiveness of sins proclaimed in his name to all the world. John's gospel ends with, I could have written a lot more, we need a bigger world. So I guess it just strikes me that the gospels as documents end with a posture of generosity in a way that this stands in such stark contrast to the forging industry. We're trying to present something that isn't the case in order to gain something from you. And the Gospels as documents they're giving something away.
Yeah, I like that. When I was lecturing on Philippians last week, it struck me that Paul had a joyful spirit in Philippians 1 when he's writing about the church that partners with him. Mm-hmm. Here's a man who was rich at one point. Here's a man who was famous at one point. Of course, he became more famous than he could have ever imagined. But that wasn't what he was pursuing. And so even though it's kind of a depressing situation because he's in chains, it's also so uplifting that he has an eternal perspective.
Right.
And so when you get to the end of John, you have that eternal perspective. You also have in John, you have another marker historically where people have gone and they've gone to the island and they think they found the cave where he wrote it. There's not many choices. you
Right.
know? Yeah, it's an exciting time to be studying the Bible, and with the tools we have now, both to understand the authenticity of them, because we can test these texts in many ways, figure out their ages. And
Is there something for you that comes to mind that, I'll give you an example. Like for me, in John's gospel, when I read that John refers to this, what we tend to think of as the Sea of Galilee, he calls it the Sea of Tiberias. And that body of water is only named that in a certain chronological range. And you either have to imagine that a later author is making some kind of archaism or flashback, or Occam's razor, the simpler solution, it just is like a date stamp for these documents are from that time. Is there something for you?
The Pilate Stone.
Okay, yeah, tell us
The
about
Pilate
that.
Stone has this title for Pilate, and for years people said the Bible's wrong because that's not his title. And then all of a sudden they find this stone in Caesarea Maritime that has the same title.
Right.
And so when there's precept or governor, it's answered right there. By the way, I hope that Pilate Stone someday gets to come to the museum. There are possibilities for a lot of things, so we don't know if that'll happen. But the Dan inscription came. So it's a marker. You're right, it's a marker, I think, of service. A better example for me right now is Bethsaida, because at Bethsaida, we have an excavation that is sponsored by the museum at Bethsaida. And if you've seen the news, our team discovered a mosaic that positively identifies that Bethsaida in the floor of an early Byzantine church, and it also identifies Peter. And so all these years, you imagine, for the last 100 years, biblical scholars are saying, we just can't find Bethsaida, the real one. And someone's been digging for 30 years, a little ways up the hill. Didn't really make sense to have a fishing town up on a hill, but
Right.
but he had reason to do that. He's a good scholar and all. But so they find this mosaic, and it's flooded many months of the year. I have a picture of the very site. They could swim in the very church they found the mosaic. They have a picture of them swimming over the mosaic. And so as the sea rose, so you're talking about Tiberias or Galilee or whatever, suddenly there's this area that they identify that people said couldn't be, and now it is.
Yeah.
And not only did that, they found, matching the foundation of the apse of the church, a first century house right beneath it. So if it's a church honoring Peter, who lived in the first century, and there's a first century house beneath it, and they found an inkwell on the site, it's a pretty good possibility this is really Bethsaida, and this is really where Peter lived there.
Right.
You have 3 of the apostles went through there. And so could you imagine being on the site when that's discovered? I mean, the first time I was shown the quote-unquote first century of Mark, and then those 3 other pieces, I about fainted. I mean, there were only 5 pieces dated to the 2nd century before that day in Dr. Obink's office. Unfortunately, we found out later he stole them. But they still are real pieces.
Yeah.
They still, people lost that. It's still the earliest piece of Mark ever discovered.
Right.
And those other 3 pieces are still early.
Or maybe just a final thought. You started with resurrection. That's clearly the most important event in the gospel narratives. As a scholar, what gives you confidence that the resurrection of Jesus actually happened?
Yeah, I was asked to film with Kirk Cameron, and they never actually aired it because I wouldn't say historically, in the end, I wouldn't be emphatic. I went all the way to a studio and filmed, and they end up using Josh McDowell. Yeah, so I think with the resurrection, first of all, you have several data points in that. By the way, Kirk, if you're listening, I'll still come back and do it for you. You're a great guy, and we had a great time there. And the Dirty Jobs guy, it was his birthday that day, so I really was bummed not actually having it air. So with the resurrection, even the tomb, the fact that, and they roll the stone away, I mean, there's all kinds of markers there where you have to find first century tombs that have stones that roll away. Well, they have one. It's not the right one, but Gordon's Calvary has that. Geographically, it needs to be the place. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre geographically matches, the crucifixion story. And they have the nail, and they know that people were crucified. So they have a lot of markers that happen there. And with the resurrection, We have ancient text. The best I can say to you is we have ancient text of people who claim to have witnessed his appearing. And in what other field of study do you not accept that that's likely what happened? Why would you not, when you have all these other markers in the Gospels that are verified by thousands and thousands of facts, and you have these people that are testifying to seeing him, you at least need to be open to the fact that they're not lying, because so far they're not lying about the other things. I like one of Wesley Huff videos. I'm saying this because it's the most easily accessible. I actually have a picture. I took a picture on my TV screen where he starts circling all of the proper nouns, really, that you can verify in just one passage. And I would say you could also do that with a certain use of a word or whatever that are not anachronistic. And so with the resurrection, we have those. Of course, you have a scholar who's given his whole life to the 7 proofs of the resurrection, and so you can find volume after volume on that. So for me, I go back to the texts themselves.
That's a great spot for us to end. And this conversation, Jerry, it's great to have you with us here on The Word Revealed and talking about the gospel narratives and the connection of history, archaeology, and help reminding us to keep a firm grip on the cross. And at the end of the day, it's the documents that we have.
Yeah, it really is. Even with James, we talked about the James Ossuary box. Yeah, Eusebius quotes Hegesippus. Hegesippus says that here's how James died, and his body was thrown right there. And so not only do you have the Bible, you have other texts surrounding it that tell stories of some of these people's lives.
Yeah.
So it's exciting.
Well, it's a joy to be together here on The Word Revealed, and we just love talking about all things Bible, and it's an honor to have you with us. So thank you for our listeners, and if you're enjoying this content, please subscribe, give us a like, and share this with people in your social media spaces. Until the next time, God bless you all. Jerry, Scott, great to be with you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you for joining Dr. David Palmer, Senior Pastor at Kenwood Baptist Church in Cincinnati, and Scott Burns, Associate Pastor. Meet us here next time for another conversation on the Bible.